So we looked at that video that kind of showed some types of intervention for swallowing and speech. Another large area in this category of CP is alternative and augmentative communication, and that's abbreviated AAC. That would be any kind of device that produces speech. And the thing about that, though, is we have to consider the type of cerebral palsy and the amount of motor control they have, because a Dynavox or a LAMP system on an iPad where they have to push a button to talk, if they don't have motor control in their hands and their arms, then that is not beneficial to them. And you'd be surprised how often I've encountered that in treatment, is taking over working with a client who has debilitating cerebral palsy, very spastic movements, no motor control, and yet they've been given this device to help them speak that they can't even access. So it is a good intervention. It's a quality intervention, but it's very dependent on the person's motor ability and their type and severity of cerebral palsy. And they just need those opportunities for communicative interactions. They need the same kind of literacy-based activities. And we just have to help parents understand that too. I grew up with parents who were in special education. If you, again, have kind of looked anything about my introduction in teaching this course. So I have been around individuals with disabilities my entire life. And my mom was a preschool teacher that had a special ed students and then one or two typical students as peer models, an integrated classroom. And so when I was in preschool, I was one of the peer models. I was in her class, and there is my friend Larry, I'll never forget him, but she would have me sit on the floor. He had cerebral palsy in a wheelchair. He was nonverbal. She would have me sit on the floor as like a 4-year-old, mind you, preschooler, and sit in a V and kind of put my arms out in the V. And she would take Larry out of his wheelchair and she would put him in my lap and his arms over my arms. And I kind of served as a human lazy boy. But she did that, and I now know she did that because she wanted Larry to be in that literacy-based activity. If we were having circle time and she was reading a story, she didn't just wheel Larry up in his wheelchair. She took him out and he was on the carpet with his peers. And I know that's extra work and it's not always feasible for every student. But as it is, I just highly encourage you, they need to be at the same level as their peers. And so if their peers are already less likely to talk to them because they don't respond or they're in a wheelchair, how much less likely are they to respond when they're at a whole different height, right? They need to be down. They need to be with their peers physically as much as possible. It's a very powerful intervention. I want you to pause here and look at this case study in a way where it's kind of telling you some classroom-based modifications for the student. And I want you to ask yourself, what are the implications for teaching children with spina bifida and other neuromuscular disorders? I hope that this can give you some ideas and also cause a brainstorm for you as you think of other things that you might be able to do. And I really encourage you to write them down in that graphic organizer and keep with you for later as you're teaching. All right, we're going to move into traumatic brain injury and language. Traumatic brain injury, there are two types really. I'm looking, I forgot all of a sudden the specific way they classify them. I think it's closed-headed and open. Oh my goodness, now I can't find it. Anyway, well, but basically there's the kind I think that most people associate with traumatic brain injury, and that would be some kind of physical attack or hit to the head. So a baseball hitting someone in the temple, example, a car accident where your skull is crushed in, a blow to the head from a fist fight, those kind of brain injuries. I think that's what we most commonly think of. But then there are other brain injuries that are occurring within the brain, and this would be like a stroke. This would also be from lack of oxygen. And there are different ways people have a lack of oxygen, and different amounts of time they lack oxygen that can cause damage to their brain. One child I worked with when I was in college and putting myself through college, I worked with a young third grader who had traumatic brain injury, and she had some pretty significant learning disabilities, and she also had some social communication disabilities, and just some problems with executive function and like inhibition and motor control and stuff. And all that had occurred, to their knowledge, there was a time when she was like 9 months old that she stopped breathing, but for less than 2 minutes. I want to say it was like 90 seconds. And it greatly has impacted her. And so we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but while you're thinking of brain injury, it's not always synonymous with how big the injury is. We just can't think of it that way, because some people could get hit in the head with something large and have less side effects than Christine, who, when you're thinking about it, she lacked oxygen for 90 seconds. That doesn't seem that long, and has some pretty significant disabilities as a result of that, even as an adult now. So just keep in mind from the beginning, we're talking about all kinds of injuries to the brain, not just like a physical outside injury, which I believe is called gosh darn, I can't remember. I'm just human. I thought I had it. I think it's called closed head. Oh, I'm struggling. Okay, so I want you to watch this video. I think this is really telling. Anytime you get perspective of the person themselves and their family, that always speaks to me. So this is talking about how these families and the individuals kind of deal with the consequences of brain injury.